The flight deck of past and present flight crews has been predominantly filled with rated officers, but there has been one enlisted position that has stood the test of time, and that position is a flight engineer. I will be explaining the history of heavy aircraft flight engineers to the training and finally the responsibilities of today's flight engineers through the glass cockpit Air Force. First thing to look into is the history behind being a flight engineer. Flight engineers of the past, normally the flight engineer has served on bomber type aircraft or heavy aircraft. The main reason for this was due to the fact that with heavier aircraft, the pilots' hands are full with a lot more aircraft than with the smaller fighter jets or anything else of that matter. For the flight engineer, he monitors the vitals of the aircraft. For example, the engines, any fluids like hydraulic fluid or oils for the engines, and so on. Past flight engineer was so special that they actually had their own functional badge to show that they were different from all the other aircrew positions. This is an example of it, with the propeller wings to show that they were part of the heavier career field, which at that time most aircraft had props. According to the Professional Development Guide, Staff Sergeant Archibald Matthews was a flight engineer that served during World War II. He earned the Medal of Honor for attempting to land a severely crippled aircraft with his co-pilot dead and his pilot badly wounded. He was cleared to release the rest of the crew on board to parachute out, but when he was ordered to, he refused because his pilot was still alive and he felt that he could try to land the aircraft without leaving his pilot behind, who was unable to jump. When Sergeant Matthews refused, he attempted to land the aircraft. After 3 attempts, the B-17 finally crashed into a field. Now it's time to take a look at the training a potential flight engineer candidate must go through. Once you're selected to attend the technical training of being a flight engineer, you go through what's called Basic Flight Engineer School, or BFE. The candidate attends a 6-week course, and with that course, you're introduced to the basic systems of aircraft, to include helicopter types now, but mainly heavy aircraft like C-130s. After that, your next academic session is your aircraft specific. For myself, it was E3s, but you can go anywhere from to C-130s to KC-10s. You go there, and it's usually held at the base at which you are going to be stationed at, depending on the aircraft. Once you finish your academic sessions during that time frame, you go into what's called the simulator phase, and the simulator phase allows you to get introduced to your actual position and lets you go ahead and see what it's like to handle in-flight emergencies and everything else, such as just doing your day-to-day job in the flight deck. After the simulator phase, you're introduced to the flying training phase. The flying training phase is where the rubber meets the road, figuratively. There you are actually flying with crews, performing training missions, but it is teaching you how to do your job. And time for that training period varies depending on the aircraft. For me specifically, it was 9 flights, which took approximately 3 months to complete. Excuse me. The next things to look at are the responsibilities of being a flight engineer in today's Air Force. In today's glass cockpit Air Force. The flight engineer handles everything from takeoff and landing data to in ground maintenance personnel interaction and in-flight emergencies. With takeoff and landing data, also known as TOLD, the flight engineer uses the charts in order to discover what the airspeeds are or ground speeds in order to perform a safe takeoff and get the airplane aloft. Some people, as a commercial traveler, you don't see that kind of thing happening, and with today's glass cockpit, a lot of times a computer handles it for you. But the good old days, we perform using the 1-1 for there, and basically all it is charts of this nature, and depending on what your chart is or what you're trying to run, you will need the pressure, altitude, temperatures, and the weight at which you're trying to perform your takeoff at. The other thing is ground maintenance personnel. As a flight engineer, you're usually the first person out to the aircraft, and so with that, you're the one that sets the tone for interacting with your ground maintenance people. For me, I used to be a ground maintainer, so I'm very familiar with these guys, and I know what it was like, and I'll never forget what it's like to always be working out in any condition. So as you head out there, you want to make sure your maintenance guys are taken care of, because they're the ones making sure your aircraft is safe for flight, and I'm showing them that I trust them with my life. The other thing to look at is, for flight engineers of today, we handle the in-flight emergencies, anywhere from smoke in the aircraft to engine shutdowns, engine failures, anything to that matter. A lot of times with commercial aircraft, you'll hear it on the news if a plane landed with an engine out or an engine fire, but you never hear that about military aircraft, and that usually happens on a day-to-day basis. Now, this has just been a small introduction into the flight engineers of past and present. Now we can look at what we covered. The flight engineer is one of the most proudest communities in the Air Force. It is selective and maintains continuously challenging environments. Throughout today, the history behind the flight engineer, the training program, and the responsibilities have been covered. With the age of the glass cockpit, the flight engineer position is dying. It is a dying career field, excuse me. But it is one that maintains its position in history throughout time. Throughout the history of the flight engineer, many brothers have given the ultimate sacrifice while performing their duties, like Sergeant Matthews, but their memories will continue on through the present flight engineers. Thank you.